the ironic thing, as we think about elections, just 17 days, right? 18 days? 18 days now. Candidate knows I'm in In a normal world, in a normal White House, after this kind of frontal assault, there would have been designated in the White House to be in charge of election security. What has the Trump White House done? They've not put anybody in charge of election security. They have not allowed a bipartisan election security bill to come to the floor of the Senate where it would get more than 90 votes. And matter of fact, they've done the opposite because they've eliminated at the White House level the cybersecurity position. So we are less prepared at the White House. Now the good news is in Virginia, and we've got a number of members of the House of Delegates here, and your job of working with the state Senate, Virginia has stepped up. We have made sure that every polling place in Virginia has voting machines that have a paper trail, so there is the ability to audit, and that is desperately needed. We're not able to say that about every state, including key states like Pennsylvania, because this White House and the majority leader of the Senate will not allow a broad-based election security bill, bipartisan bill, to come to the floor.
All right, my final question is a very broad one for the panel, but we have a fantastic panel for this. What do you see as the greatest threats or as major threats to America on a national security basis for the next 10 years or so? That's a broad question.
Yeah, I'm happy to sort of elaborate a little further. I mean, I'm deeply worried, particularly when we look at the way that the Chinese government is developing and investing in technology, and particularly artificial intelligence. Very, very data-centric tools that it is coupled with heavy surveillance domestically, but it is beginning to export to other parts of the world. So China has this initiative called the Belt and Road Initiative, which is ostensibly an economic and trade sort of program, but is really actually very strategic from a Chinese government perspective. And China is exporting these high-tech tools, high-tech surveillance operations, the ability for authoritarians to exert more efficiency in how they are controlling their populations, to Africa, to Latin America, but by the way, increasingly to parts of Europe, where the digital Silk Road, as it's often called, is actually being laid. Chinese technology companies, telecommunications companies like Huawei and ZTE, which of course have been the subject of a lot of discussion in the United States about how to protect ourselves against these threats, are being incorporated into the telecommunications systems of NATO allies. And this is going to create enormous vulnerabilities, not too far over the horizon in terms of how we think about our security, our work with our allies, and how we're able to secure ourselves in the 21st century. So, at the same time, we have our technology companies, some of whom are more willing apparently to work with the Chinese Communist Party than to work with China. And so we are at risk of falling very quickly behind in the new arms race in the sphere of artificial intelligence. And I'm very worried that if we don't begin to invest in these technologies, to really be able to think about how government and the private sector can work together to make sure that these technologies are harnessed in a way that is consistent with our values and enhances our security, I think that we run some real risks of quickly falling behind in a way that not only hurts our security, but also, to the values point that Tom's making, allows for authoritarians to really get the leg up in what is becoming an increasing battle between democracies and authoritarians on the world stage.
If I can riff off of that for a second, I think in addition to the sort of Skynet-type concerns of AI, I'm really concerned about the number of jobs that are going to be disrupted and eliminated. Senator Warner has really been leading on this sort of work issue. We're talking about up to half of all jobs being disrupted in some form. And when we think about this, we can't think about it in a vacuum. We have to think about it connected to the rise of both authoritarianism, but also the weaponization of racism and othering in politics around the world, including our own. I actually think one of the great challenges of the next 50 years is pluralism itself, is the coexistence that I think the United States has really led on. And I think when we look at, it's not a coincidence that when Russia looked at all of our vulnerabilities, the surface level issue was our cyber vulnerabilities. But what they saw was racial divisiveness, and particularly the ability of some politicians to play on rising white supremacy and anxiety. And I think we saw a really powerful counter to that in Virginia last year. Ralph Northam made the idea of an inclusive Virginia absolutely central to his election. Ed Gillespie leaned into one of the most racially divisive campaigns, as the Washington Post called it, and we saw Virginians overwhelmingly opt for an inclusive Virginia over a divided Virginia. When we think about, as we head into these challenges, part of the question is the type of leadership that has built resiliency going in. And that resiliency is everything from our shorelines to climate change, it's our cybersecurity, but it is also the extent to which we have built a res publica, we've built a common space of these things coming together. And instead we're going into a situation when we think about how weak Donald Trump has made us, it's important to think he's probably the first president since World War II of the United States not to be the most powerful person in the world. He's probably not even in the top 5 most powerful people in the world. That's how much he has weakened our standing. We are getting laughed at around the world, right? And so when we go into these challenges, whether it's the future of work or future of democracy or future of pluralism, the question is whether we put our best team on the field and whether we prepare before those dangers come. And I think overall we have to be on a question of whether we're in a trajectory towards this dystopia that Donald Trump and often Barbara Comstock describe of a divided thing, or are we the aspirational America? Are we the America that actually has set these ideals, and even when we fall short of those, we are striving towards them? So as we reach these challenges to national security over the coming years, will certainly be cyber and climate. There are going to be hard power concerns. We're going to see countries who respond to the disruption in work by turning towards nationalism, either against an internal other or an external other. And the question is, what team are we bringing to the table? And I think we want people like Mark Warner and Jennifer Wexton out there looking at those 20-year arcs, and we need to make sure that our fundamentals at home are strong, whether that's the rule of law, whether that's our freedoms, or whether that's our ability to coexist and love our neighbors as ourselves.
Sure, I'll pick up right where you left off, Tom, because if you look out the way you framed the question, Jennifer, 10 years, it's really hard to even predict what the national security threats will be. We know we're going to face great power conflict, Russia, China, asymmetric threats, cybersecurity, terrorism, technological competition, the way we've talked about AI. But I think what you put your finger on it, Tom. What's going to help us? What's going to lead us through those threats? Again, as RD I think talked about, is our values, and it's our values, our belief in the rule of law, our belief in free expression that's under pressure, our belief in human rights, and the fact that we've been a leader and we've been up to these fights. Again, as you said, RD, every decade as Americans, we've been up to all of these fights, all of these threats, because of our commitment to those values. And when we get away from those values and approach national security and foreign relations as transactional, or as cynically as the president has done, we lose that leadership, that moral leadership. We lose what's foundational to our country. And that, if you ask me, what the greatest threat to us going forward is moving away from those values as we face the inevitable threats we will face going in the next 10 years.
Try to say a couple of different things. I agree with everything that's been said, but one of the biggest threats we face is the changing climate. The planet may survive, but they have the ability of humans on that planet. And the latest report from the UN panel should be a huge wake-up call for the whole world, including our country. It's screaming red that we are running out of time to do something serious about climate. It will have huge knock-on effects on our ability to feed a growing population around the world. It will have create instability among and between nations as people migrate, get somewhere where they can feed themselves and earn a living. And then obviously the threat of communities going underwater and having huge changes in how we live. And we're just, the people running the United States government right now have their heads in the sand on this issue. And we need to get our heads looking forward and figuring out all kinds of solutions to address this threat to all. stable fiscal situation in order to invest in the future, address climate change, clean energy, education, transportation, you name it. And the Republicans and the president just blew a $2 trillion hole in the deficit at a time when we have 4% unemployment. This is not a time to be building more red ink, but to be building reserve for the future. And that would be a threat to everything we're worried about, including national security. It would put pressure on the defense budget in the coming years unless we fix this problem.
Well, I want to thank everyone so much for coming today and this amazing panel, which has given us so much to think about, but also, for me at least, a great feeling of optimism as we go forward, because I know that we are better than we're showing the world right now. And I feel confident that on November 6th and beyond, we will show the world our true values as we move forward. I want to pass it off to Senator Warner for just a couple concluding remarks before we wrap this up.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I again echo what you said about this panel. These are the kind of folks that you're going to surround yourself with when you get to Congress in terms of national security. You're going to do people in the 10th district very, very good job. And I think, as been mentioned, national security is more than about our military. It's also about our moral leadership. And one of the things that I don't think I fully appreciated until I was a couple of years on the intelligence committee was that by no means are we perfect. Sometimes we are naive, but the rest of the world, when the chips are down, looks to America. If we're waiting for the notion that whatever the crisis du jour of the week is, all due respect, the European Union is going to come together and lead, or certain nations in Asia come together and lead, it's not going to happen. American military leadership, economic leadership, and moral leadership are absolutely essential. And Tom probably spoke to this better than any of us. That moral leadership right now is in question. And what I'm most concerned about is we can replace a Scott Pruitt with a better PPA. We can even replenish a program that may have been cut. We can put back in place rules of the road, or put in place rules of the road around social media, so we don't have as much, we still maintain innovation. What we can't put back is the kind of reputation that under Democrats and Republicans, American leadership earned in the 75 years after World War II that is being eroded. What we can't put in place, as Matt has mentioned, is the notion of America's respect for rule of law when we have a president of the United States that almost on a daily basis undermines the intelligence community or blasts the FBI or blasts the Justice Department. So I think help is coming. The help is coming in the form of a new Congress. If that help is going to come, every one of us room has to go out and do our part in the next 18 days. So let's make that happen. Thank you.
Yeah.